On behalf of the Asia Society India Center and Bloomberg, it is my honor and privilege to actually welcome all of you who have taken time out and joined us for this very important conversation. And I think what makes today's discussion a little different is that it's not only one where we are going to discuss perspectives, practices, but at the end of it all, there will also be actionables, and we will also kind of have some key takeaways. So that this series of conversations that the Asia Society India Center and Bloomberg has been supporting, this does not become a one-off event, but these conversations continue. Right. So my name is Rohan Sarma, and I've been given the very difficult task of moderating this very, very august panel. Some of them have been, for me, role models. Right. Anshu is here, and Anshu and me were on a similar panel some time back. And of course, many of them are, known to me. We've been on panels before. But I think the best part about today's panel, and all credit goes to Purvaja and her team for actually putting together a very multidisciplinary and, basically all the representatives today are representing different institutions. So I think that's very important because today's discussion is going to be very interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and all of them are, in a way, representing different institutions in the whole spectrum of development organizations. Okay, so before we start, today's discussion topic, as you all know, is strengthening corporate NGO partnerships. And before we start, I think it's very important to understand the four key words that we are talking about today. So when we talk of strengthening, I think we start off with an assumption that there is a lacune, there is a gap, there is a weakness. There is also probably a certain animosity or hostility between these two very, very important stakeholders, corporates and NGOs. Often when we talk of corporates and NGOs, we often look at them as occupying two polar ends of the spectrum, right? And that's why I think we often tend to ignore the space in between, which allows for so much of hybridity and complexity, right? So I think the whole discussion today is about how do we converge? How do we, lessen this gap that exists between corporates and NGOs? Because another thing I think we should remember is that NGOs are not corporates. So therefore, expecting NGOs to be like corporates is an unfair ask. Similarly, corporates are not NGOs. So expecting corporates to take up the entire bulk and moral responsibility of doing welfare, I think, is also not fair. So I'm here to basically bring in a very pragmatic practice, and we will hear all of you. And my job is, as a tailor, just to stitch in your arguments, weave a narrative, and collaborate and compile all your responses. I think talking of corporates and NGOs, it's also important to understand that it is CSR which has really brought this relationship more into focus. It has either exacerbated it. It has basically, so CSR is that catalyst, I would say, which has actually, and I think that's why today we are linking corporate social responsibility to corporate and NGOs. And despite having different food palettes, be it the corporate has a different food palette, so does the not-for-profit sector. But I think it is the whole CSR that brings all of us on the same table for this meal. Having said that, I think today we are also very, very honored and privileged to have with us other representatives from India's social sector who have been leaders and who have been thought leaders. So we did not want this to just be a webinar where we speak, right? So the whole program design, and I want to quickly take you through a program design. One is that it is intended to be a conversation, which means that we want it to be a two-way flow. And that's why towards the end, we have a dedicated 20 minutes for all of you who will be patiently listening in, because at the end of the 20 minutes, we want to listen to each of you who have logged into today's conversation. Secondly, it's going to be very participatory. As you know, like I said, we have panelists from multi-stakeholder institutions. All of you are representing different institutions. And that, I think, is so important because, we need to understand when we talk of partnerships, in India, partnerships is not a one-man show, right? I think development in India is not a one-man show. Development in India is many men, many women, and of course, our colleagues and partners from the LGBTQIA+, right? So development in India is a multi-starter, and that's why all of you are here. And we want to hear all of you. Having said that, today's 60-minute discussion, of which I think we've already eaten into some part of it. So we will actually divide it into three parts, like I said: perspectives, practices, and actionables. So that's the that's just for the panelists. To be very quick, I basically want to, as a provocator, I just want to nudge my panelists before we start with largely 5 points. One, when we're talking about partnerships today, we also, I think, need to align ourselves with a larger global agenda, which is the whole SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically on SDG number 17, which is Partnership for the Goals. That's one. Second is, I think all of us who are here, despite which type of organization we represent or which stakeholder we represent, we all here have a common agenda. And the common agenda is to work for a better India by making development work for the people. So whether you're a corporate, whether you're an NGO, whether you're a bilateral, it doesn't matter. I think you all are here with a common agenda. So we will actually explore that a little bit more. Talking of CSR, and I have had the good fortune of being part of the CSR legislation and policy making way back in 2010. And drawing from that, I think CSR is a means to an end. So what really is this end? We will hear our panelists talk about. And then, I am slightly uncomfortable with this use of this term NGO, right? Today, I find that everybody who is not a corporate is referred to as an NGO. But I think that is doing disservice to the heterogeneity that exists in our development sector, right? We have different types of institutions, each with a specific mandate, each with a specific role, and each with a specific core competency. And for me, this becomes the key conceptualizing or reimagining partnerships. Okay, if we just end up calling everybody as an NGO, I think we are doing a disservice. And I think that is where the role of intermediaries, and many of our organizations and friends who've joined us today are intermediaries. I think that is where they play such a crucial role, because they ensure that the conversation is ongoing between this divide between corporate and NGO. They ensure that this regular conversation, and that's where my compliments to Asia Society, India Center, and Bloomberg for actually putting this together, because it's so important to carry on the conversations. Right, before I open the floor to the House, two provocations and two nudges for my panelists to kickstart today's proceedings, and these are both based on my past research that I have done. So one is, I think, when talking of the CSR ecosystem, I see two interesting parallel phenomena which I've also written about. One is corporatization of NGOs. So CSR in India has, on one hand, led to corporatization of NGOs. On the other hand, it has led to NGOization of corporates. And secondly, in the last decade, where I have had the good fortune of working and interacting closely with policymakers, industry leaders, I get a sense that corporate India feels that, while CSR regulatory frameworks have continued to tighten the noose on us, largely in terms of reporting and, spending, the same does not apply for non-profits. So this is what I repeatedly hear. And to address this gap, I, back in 2012, had created a set of guidelines for non-profits, right, and which was subsequently adopted by various ministries. And that is when I had, in 2012, proposed a concept called the NGO social responsibility, drawing from corporate social responsibility. So I now open the floor of the House and would love to hear all our five thought leaders who are joining us on this panel. And with the nudge, what do you think of corporatization of NGOs, NGOization of corporates? And is there any concept like the NGO social responsibility? Over to all the panelists. Please feel free to come in any order. Thank you.
Okay, I'll take the lead probably if nobody's speaking. It's Jayant here. So good morning. Privileged to be here. So for us, when we talk about CSR as a means to the end, for us this is a way to actually bring in social inclusiveness in this world. We work with over 150 odd corporates. A major part of our funding actually comes from corporates, and I think it's extremely collaborative. I think it's also there's a great amount of knowledge which is there at both the ends, the NGO world and the CSR world, and I think there's a lot of sharing which happens. Employees are also very eager, so I think it works very well for both of them. We've kind of borne the fruits of this CSR partnership, and it's been working really well for us, and we are doing some really meaningful work. Again, on the corporatization of NGOs and vice versa. I'm a living example. I come from the corporate world. I have adjusted very well. Last 6 years I've been here, and I can tell you that I have a really, really peaceful sleep. I enjoy myself. I think I'm a much better person. I have learned much more, in the sector, and I hope I have been able to contribute equally also. But I think, Magic Bus again is a classic example of, getting the best from both the worlds. We have some really top talented people from the social sector, and also, good people from the corporate world. And we've seen the benefits of, this corporatization of this. It brings in, a great deal of transparency. It brings in, I think, a lot of governance. And we are finding that, more and more corporates are looking at that. This new CSR laws also, wanting that, impact should be there. There should be social return on investment. So I think it's a great step in the right direction, but I think there has to be a balance in whatever we do. So I'll just kind of, end this over here. So.
Right. Thanks so much, Jayant, for really laying the seeds. Anshu, over to you. You are a veteran. You understand both sides very well. What your take on this?
So, hello, Jayant. First thing is a disclaimer that I don't read all these books. This is a fake background because some of the friends must be, surprised. What is this happening? I'm in US and I'm at a friend's place. So that's how this beautiful background. So Jayant, to be honest, if I don't think that corporates can actually teach governance or transparency. Let's be upfront here, okay? Fine, because there are bad apples everywhere. There are good people everywhere, and we certainly need to learn from each other. There is no doubt that the corporatization is happening. Corporatization is not that bad word also. It depends what good we are taking from each other. I think more, the problem is that again, we are talking in these kind of forums, we are talking more on the process, on policies and systems. I think it's all about the purpose and people in our life. And when I say purpose and people, I also say that, do we value each other enough? Right? Can anyone say that NGOs are the beneficiaries instead of calling them expert agencies of certain work? I think the biggest problem overall which has been there is the language and the lenses which we all are using in doing this. And I would say the most unfortunate part is that COVID has also not taught us anything. I mean, many of us very hopeful that now things will change because in COVID, a large part of the world failed and miserably failed. And a lot of big things, a lot of big planning failed, and a lot of small things worked. So my point, why I am giving all these vague things here, just to put it in order, that in any case, there was a time to relook into certain things, but now the time has certainly come to look into things in a different way. It is important to understand the issues in a much deeper way. It is important to understand that there is a geographical need, there's a need of certain communities. I mean, I'll give you a very simple example. In the pandemic time, we came out with a vertical at Goonj, which is called missed out communities. And the whole concept was that there are people like people with disability, people with leprosy. And I don't know how many of us know that we still have about 800 colonies of people with leprosy. And that is still one of the biggest contributor for the disability, right? Or sex workers or transgenders. So these are communities which are marginalized, and these are communities which need people like us in any case, okay, to stand with them. So the whole idea of us was that if the common citizens who are earning okay, if because of the pandemic they become marginalized, because of the job loss and what happened to those people? And then when we were talking to people with leprosy, we realized, and one of the most shocking incidents which came in our life is that when people said that how they were forced to use kerosene or phenyl on their wounds because there was no attention to the medical need of the people with leprosy. Because for the last 2 years in a country like India and many other countries, the only disease on this earth is COVID. There's no other disease. Every single person in the first lot was talking about food. In the second lot was talking about oxygen and ventilator. Ventilator to the places where we don't have electricity or we don't have oxygen.
Anshu, I'm sorry for cutting you in right now. I'll interject there. We'll come back to your other detailed questions, but I think to start off at a generic level, you've raised a very important point that this whole over focus on COVID, over focus on certain thematics, which even data from the ministry is showing us. And I'll actually move on to Nidhi actually. So Nidhi, welcome. What do you feel about, I think Anshu said that there is not much to learn from corporates in terms of transparency and governance, which again is a fair point because we also know of corporates resulting in a lot of malpractices. But I think to make the argument very balanced, there are and I think Anshu said that very clearly, there are good and bad apples on both sides. Right? So this is a forum where we're trying to talk more constructive. So over to you, Nidhi. So specifically on the contextual questions, do you think corporatization has done the sector well? Do you think this, being a corporate, do you think you have been inspired by NGOization? Do you think that's happened, or it's just something that we're coining here?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for organizing this, and I think good discussions here. I mean, honestly, 25 years in development space and having worked, I would say, on both sides of the table, my take is, I don't think we're talking about corporatization or NGOization, etc. I think it's more to do with the professionalism. And to generalize or to label any sector with any kind of, statement would be a dangerous mistake. Because, see, what happens is that maybe, there were times when there was an image that NGOs had that, okay, they are doing service and there is this charity kind of approach, but we've really moved on. Look at the whole army of professionals and the whole, I would say, community of practice that has got built up over these years. Youngsters are choosing development sector.
Right. I think we've lost Nidhi.
In terms of, am I audible now?
You are.
Am I back?
Yes. Please.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Sorry for this because I'm on my way to the airport. But the issue here is, talking about this in a very generalized way by having that, okay, this sector has this and this sector has this, will not lead us to a collaborative and a cooperative approach, which is the need of the hour. What we need is very, very high standards of professionalism. And I think there are, I mean, corporates have the highest possible, I would say, the kind of vigilance they are under, not only from the governments, whichever country they are working in, but also from their own clients, customers. So I think ethics and professionalism is very much the core of any good work which is happening, any job employment creation, any good products which are coming out, extremely high level of brands which are there. And the same is I would say, the requirement and the need, and which is also happening. If you look at any good organization working in development space, look at their governance, look at the kind of passion their people bring on board, the commitment, years of service, years of improvement, analysis, going to the remotest possible area, working with most disadvantaged groups of people. So, my take is kind of, I can sum it into words. It's professionalism and ethics at the end of the day, which defines, the character of any good work which is happening and which are critical, central values as well as practices.
Right. Thanks a lot, Nidhi. That's very important. I think, very, very balanced argument there from Nidhi. She says it's not about corporatization or NGOization, but it's basically about, professionalism, which I think is absolutely a non-negotiable. But, and I know that Anshu was smiling, and I know why he's smiling, because, professionalism at what cost? And also, Nidhi, you spoke about professional standards, right? Now, who defines these standards? This could be a philosophical debate. I spent more than a decade in academia, so in my class, I would say it otherwise. But at the end of the day, in funding, unfortunately or fortunately, this is for all our NGO friends who've joined here, the standards are decided by the funder, whether you like it or not. So, I think there's also a practical aspect to it. But, thanks a lot, Nidhi, for really bringing, I think you brought about another very interesting point of labeling. And I think a lot of labeling and negative stereotyping has been happening on both sides, right? Corporates view NGOs in a certain way. NGOs think, corporates don't understand them. I think that is where it's so important to have a balanced discussion like today. So thank you very much, Nidhi. We'll come back to you on the other areas. But just on a lighter note, this is for all the friends who've tuned in. I was thinking, what is the symbolic message that each of us speakers are giving out? So like Anshu has a lot of books. Okay, so remember, to be a development professional, you need to constantly be up to date with knowledge, knowledge and data. So Anshu, I think that's a good background. And of course, you see Jayant with his wireless headphones, which implies, technology is very important. That's something that, we in the social sector need to know. Often in non-profits, a little, reticent and a little uncomfortable when it comes to technology, including me. So I'm also upgrading. And as you see, Nidhi is on the move. And, I was thinking she's going to the field, but, mobility is very important in the social sector. You can't be stuck to only your position, right? Often, non-profits have found when corporates have these discussions with them, they're very, very possessive. And no, this is the only way to do things. So I think we need to be a little more flexible in the social sector because it's evolving so rapidly. So that's it. We'll come to Arnav. Arnav, again, thanks a lot for all the excellent work that BMGF does and supports for the development of India. What is your take, Arnav, in the introductory section? And then, of course, we'll understand a little bit more about partnerships later on. Over to you, Arnav.
No, thanks, Rohan, and great panel. Lots of insightful comments and points of view. So I think for us, partnerships is critical, right? I mean, all of the work that we do is in partnerships with government, NGOs, other philanthropies, communities. Because all of us are at the end of the day chasing, impact at scale. And I think every organization has its, brings its own strengths. And we believe that together we can do much more, than one could do alone. I think in my personal view, I think all types of phenomena, archetypes are all welcome. I think the more discussion we can have on all of this is all insightful. It brings on different points of view. I also feel that I think everyone in the current environment and the way the world is, evolving, everyone needs to continue to reinvent to stay relevant and, achieve the goals. Because you mentioned digitization, you mentioned mobility. At the same time, there's also one needs to see how they're able to build multi-stakeholder collaborators, right? So for example, there was the RCRC coalition, which was established at time of COVID, where multiple organizations came together, to work on COVID response. Then there was the India COVID Response Fund, where we were one of the partners with Give India. And it was phenomenal that, more than 200 corporates, 50 plus foundations, and also everyday givers joined the India COVID Response Fund, and we were able to galvanize about $150 million. I don't think an operation of that kind of a magnitude would be possible unless, corporate philanthropy, governments and NGOs would work together. I know that it could have not been done alone by anyone, for sure. I think there are 2 points from my perspective. I think one would be that multi-stakeholder collaborators and impact, and second would be about reinvent and evolution, given how the environment is itself adopting and evolving so rapidly. Thanks.
Thanks very much for putting that out there. And I think, COVID has been a great lesson to understand, the severity of the problem that we face in the development sector cannot be handled. Like I, started by saying at the outset, in India, development is not a one-man show, right? This is something I think that district collectors, the Niti Aayog have, actually appreciated the work of the not-for-profit sector. And there's no doubt that, we have actually pulled through this pandemic, and a lot of credit goes to our friends in the not-for-profit. There's just absolutely, and I'm glad that it has been recognized, right, by the powers that be. And I think we are all here to actually see how we can continue this. And I'll come to Anshu later, whether, these responses is only when a crisis happens, or can we learn? What are the learnings from this crisis? And I think that there are so many, and I'd like some of you to actually share some of that. You also brought about, Arnav, this thing of reinventing. I think that's so important. And I said this point just before you spoke, that we often become too comfortable in the social sector with where we come from, and that's because there is a deficit in such forums where the corporates, NGOs talk to each other. So that is lacking. So everybody is working in silos. So I think it's very, very important to constantly reinvent. And I think when I was part of the policy making for the first ever CSR guidelines in India, it was very clear from the government that we do not want funds from corporates. I think this is what many corporates today have realized, that it is not money that you need, right? Because, often you will see that the entire budget outlay, and I remember in the initial years, 25,000 crores was supposed to be the expected budget outlay from CSR. Actual spend was only 5,000 crore. And I remember one bureaucrat came and said, yeah, but corporate India thought we will change this country through CSR. Yes, it is a great opportunity. But in that particular year, 75,000 crore was just a budget outlay of the Ministry of Rural Development. So it's not money that government wants from CSR. I think it's this innovation and this managerial expertise and all that, Nidhi spoke about, this professionalization, governance, all of that, that we can learn from. So we have to be very clear that what really is our ask. And when we're talking of partnerships, who can play what role? Because like I said, this is a teamwork. Development outcomes can only be improved through team. Everybody identifying what role they have. Coming to you, Shiv, you are a very important stakeholder in, helping India achieve its development outcomes, right? You lead the CSR at Ultratech Cement, which is part of the Aditya Birla Group. We all know that, the excellent CSR initiatives that they have. What is your take? I mean, where do you put yourself in this argument that Nidhi and Anshu have so far set out? When Anshu says there is not much to learn from corporates in terms of governance and transparency, of course, I'm sure he agrees there are lots more to learn. Whereas Nidhi says basically it's about CSR has made the sector more professional. What do you think, since you are also working with a lot of implementing agencies?
Hi, good morning, my friends from the social sector. And greetings from the Aditya Birla Center for Community Initiatives and Rural Development. I'm really honored to be in this august presence of implementers and people like Anshu and Rohan and Jayant and Nidhi. And I believe there has been a sensitization at both ends for good. And I agree with your views when you say that there has to be some social sector responsibility as well. However, organically, it has so happened that the rate of competition among the NGOs has gone up. There's no doubt in that. And in recent times also, the role of large consulting firms like KPMG, EY, E&Y, Deloitte, etc. has in fact pushed the other small organizations to scale up their level of implementation, the transparency and impact. Moreover, many NGOs have started to prepare for international accreditations like SGS, which shows or it's an indication that the NGOs are understanding that they are the ones who play a very important role in the future of the companies. Now, according to the worldwide research also, more than 78% of the shareholders to consider ESG parameter as the key driver while deciding their investment over the financial health. The government itself is trying also to streamline the mechanisms or guidelines on which the NGOs across the country work. And I personally believe, I believe that it's a CSR investment should not remain as a parallel development projects in the country. It should be since government is the largest network of development, it should be a symbiotic growth. And it is gradually coming to that, organically, or it's taking time due to different disruptions in the society and all, but it's gradually coming to all. But it's in a way good for all.
Right. Thanks, Shiv, for that introductory thing. Now, this part of the session, we've set the context. I think very, very useful inputs from everyone. Of course, you can see that a lot of us on the panel are wearing spectacles. Again, to understand the symbolic value of it, it's also important to have vision, right? All of you are leaders, and spectacles give us, hopefully, it gives us vision. And it's very important. And Anshu, brought up this concept of purpose, which I am so very passionate about. And when I joined Samhita, we are here to build a new model in the sector, and I welcome all of you to join us. Many of you are already working with us, where purpose and profitability, this balancing act becomes very important. And thanks, Anshu, for bringing that. So I think fantastic context setting. We'll now come to the core of today's topic, which is partnerships. And to have a very research approach, we'll talk about conceptualization, operationalization, and measurement. Okay. And my first question is, since and I really like it when panelists disagree, because disagreement is great, because that just shows, why we are part of a democracy. It's important to have varying viewpoints. So I'll come to the first question in this section is actually for Nidhi and Anshu. We're talking of partnerships, but what are the attributes of a partnership? At the end of the day, Anshu, I know you spoke about it. You spoke about values, but are values even important in a partnership? I know that even Nidhi spoke about ethics. And what are those values, Nidhi, that are core to HCL's organizational partnership approach, and likewise for you at Goonj? Maybe we could have Nidhi take the question first, followed by Anshu, please.
No, thank you for that. And I think partnerships, we started with that. I remember you said SDG goal number 17, and, even prior to that, the way we've been functioning in the development space. First of all, it's important for everyone to understand that it is impossible to achieve the kind of goals that we have set up for ourselves without, I would say, highly productive partnerships. That's important, because partnerships is also something, at times there could be one-sided initiatives, and there could be, things which we are kind of, they've not been co-created. And I always say that partnerships really need to be coming from both sides. And that's one fundamental that we at least surely look forward to in partnerships is they need to be passion-driven, which means there has to be a shared passion, especially in the development space. There's so many occasions we meet government officers, we meet, other corporates, non-government, the people on the ground who are working. We also have models where we are directly working. When HCL Foundation, if I talk about ourselves, we are also a trust and, pretty much implementing so much work in partnership with communities directly, in partnership with children, and so on and so forth. So I think it's fundamental is that are we sharing the goal that we have set up for ourselves? Is there a zeal at both the ends? Because if it's something that, okay, fine, someone wants you to work on it and then you just take it up just because there's a livelihood or a funds issue, they definitely fall apart. The second is there is this whole great level of trust, which is important, which is critical. I understand that in the current times when the governance has become further stringent, only because we really want to ensure that there is shared transparency across. There are regulations which need to be kind of, clearly made, I would say documentation to be made publicly available, all in the larger interest. It is important that everyone takes it in the equal stride. And there is a proactive kind of work towards what needs to be done would need to be done. We'll not be able to evade, for example, if last year, I think there was a huge one was COVID, of course, a lot of funding dried up in the sector, went towards COVID, but then we kept our commitment towards the regular development. Just now, when Anshu was mentioning about leprosy, there is no point working on COVID response by closing down leprosy projects. So one has to really prioritize and remain focused for the larger missions that they have taken up. And those were certain conscious decisions that had to be made at the board level, and I'm glad were made in the bigger groups that they continued to focus on, including, like I would say, at HCL, we did not disturb a single rupee which was in the long-term regular development. 200 partners that we have across the country working in the remotest regions. We knew that this is the only aid which is reaching there. This work needs to continue. If we have to top up, we have to garner more resources for the response that we have to make towards the humanitarian crisis that all of us went through. That's the other bit. The third thing, and I'll close there, when it comes to partnerships, is that there is this whole feeling of equality. That's something which we cannot, write policies around it. It's all about attitude. It's all about we approach each other. It's how much face time do we really provide to each other. And that goes, I would say, in terms of sharing the leadership responsibilities in such a manner that the respect for each other percolates, down the stream. Because the moment this whole grantor and grantee and those kinds of things start, or the other way around, when even leadership, I would say, even at the, I have seen that there is little time that one is able to attract from the leadership despite a lot of funding, going to the field. And that's where partnerships start becoming a little, I would say, one-sided. So it's important that there is enough engagement and collaboration, co-creation and co-implementation, which I think, so far my experience goes, has resulted in very joyful partnerships.
Yeah, thanks, Nidhi. I'll come to you, Anshu, in a bit. But before that, I think, Nidhi pretty much summed up this part of the discussion. And, she spoke about equality. So my question to you, Anshu, is, do you think it's equality that we're talking about, or is it more of equity? Because, I want to link this to all that you said about leprosy, etc. So in the sector, is equality really possible? I mean, can a donee, so-called donee, be equal to a donor? Do they really have equal power to bargain? Because we're talking about how do we convert this into practice, right? In theory and in semantics, it sounds very good. So coming to you, Anshu.
Whether they have the power or not, they should have the power, right? I mean, that's the change which we need to bring. Okay. What we have been arguing is that, it's a very simple, just see this, that if I give time, I'm a donor. If the community gives time, there are still beneficiaries. If I give time, if I put in my skill, I'm a donor, I'm a giver, I'm sitting on an elevated platform. If the community gives a skill, there are still beneficiaries. So this language is a problem somewhere, fine? Because this language is not just the language, but our entire thought process. And this can only change when we have mutual respect. When we understand that every single person in this entire process brings something, okay? So I always compare it, with the two things. One, I say that it is like whatever work we all are doing, in the screen today, and hundreds and thousands of other people, it's like a war, fine? And war, you only win with the strategy. War, you never win with the weapons. So war, you win with the strategy and teamwork. And in this particular teamwork, when I say it is all about the partnerships of various stakeholders. So when I talk about our work, we have these hundreds of partners, some 700 odd partners at the grassroots, but also this huge amount of relationship with the market association, RWAs, to the corporates, to the foundation and all. And it's a relationship of equal where we say that every single participant is bringing something. So instead of donor beneficiary, we are a stakeholder. So the second thing which I often say, and I think that will explain about your equity and equality and so many other things. I say this is like, on one side I'm saying it is like a war, and on the other side I'm saying it is like a havan, right? तो हवन में क्या होता है? हवन में हम सब लोग आहुति डालते हैं और हर चीज की, every single thing has its own importance. So for example, I'm not a very religious person, but just to explain this. So you have ghee, you have lakdi, you have havan kund, you have machis, you have samagri, and you have shraddha, whatever you have. What we need to understand, every single component has equal value. The day the machis ki tilli think or start thinking, ये हवन मेरी वजह से हो रहा है, that means the matches की तिल्ली is actually forgetting कि यदि अकेली जलेगी तो बुझा दी जाएगी. और वो माचिस की तिल्ली वाली गलतफहमी हम में से बहुत सारे लोगों को हो जाती है. कभी डेवलपमेंट सेक्टर के लोगों को हो सकती है कि हम ही जानते हैं ये काम कैसे होगा. कभी कॉर्पोरेट को या मनी गिवर को हो सकती है कि सिर्फ पैसे की वजह से हो रहा है ये काम. So all the stakeholders can become matches की तिल्ली sometime, And without understanding that the value of that matches ki tilli, that stake is only when all other partnerships, all other people are treated as a stakeholder in the same respectful manner. I'll stop here.
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks, Anshu. I think it's so important what both you and Nidhi are saying. And that's the beauty of the development sector, that even though, Nidhi understands the business side of things, and she said that, during COVID, they had to take certain business decisions, and Anshu has been somebody who has really worked closely on the ground, and he has a critical perspective. It's so beautiful that both of them are basically saying it's important to have values, right, and ethics. So basically, and I think that's where this whole professionalism of development, I would interpret it from that perspective, right? That how do you give importance, how do you give respect to the time, skills, etc., that all of us in whatever capacity are bringing to the table? And I think that's important. Right? You spoke about war, and you're right that at the end of the day, as far as we are concerned, that as a country, we have to fight poverty, disease, and I think that's what BMGF does, right? I mean, we have to fight against the SDGs. I mean, and so that's the larger war against unemployment, against illiteracy, and against food and hunger, and that's what Anshu and Goonj do. And for all those who don't know, Anshu actually, he didn't mention this, but he came up with a very interesting thing that I, was on a panel with him once, and he said the dignity of the recipient is important. And I think some of these concepts, how, practically, it's all good to talk about it. But I think, again, I'm trying to bring the focus back on, many of you are part of implementation, right? How do we actually, for example, now, tomorrow, if we are going to get impact assessments done, how do you measure dignity? Is it at all important to measure dignity, right? And these are some of the research paradigms that, and I'm a sociologist, I come from a qualitative research paradigm. These are some of the things that I'm trying to bring into the kind of research that we at Samhita are doing for corporates, telling them that it's important to understand some of these values, some of these ethics, and if the things are changing and things will take slow. So, I want to compliment all of you who have joined us here today for the patience, immense patience that you have. Because today we're talking about social transformation and change cannot happen overnight. And this is something I want to tell my corporate friends. Please be patient with your not-for-profit partners. They are trying their best. Of course, there is no questions asked about it. There needs to be more professionalism. There needs to be more accountability, and there has to be equal standards for both corporate sector and NGO sector. I'll deep dive into you, Jayant. We often talk of partnerships, but partnerships for what? I mean, you started off by saying that there are important knowledge transfers also happening, and I'll actually probe you a little bit deeper on that. Are partnerships always meant to have just commercial implications, or have also there been non-financial aspects in a partnership that, say, Magic Bus has actually had the experience of? I'm sorry, you are on mute, Jayant. You need to unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
So, Rohan, I'll just comment on, I think one point that you picked up about, this having patience, the corporate end. And I completely kind of aligned with that. When I joined from the corporate, when I came in, and my team used to tell me that it's going to take so much time to do certain things. And I used to actually feel that, why is it taking so much time? And over the 6 years that I've spent, I've realized that, social change does take time. And, you can't always kind of commit to, certain results because, the external environment is changing and you have to be patient about it. I think Anshu spoke about equity and equality. I think extremely, extremely important. Coming on knowledge transfer. So, see, we work in a very collaborative spirit, and we are just not looking as a funder partner, as a donor. We've never done that. And that is where, wherever we're finding that the funder partners are engaged, we find that the results are far more deeper. And I'll give you an example, we started this whole livelihood, and today we are one of the largest players on the livelihood side. This was an idea which was from BMW Foundation. They said that there's this, real need for, making people employable. They're not finding. And we started off very small in 2014 with, that idea. And then we got MSDF to sign up as one of our partners, and they really, really pushed us. They helped us kind of, build efficacy into the program, bring the unit cost down, work on, our whole processes, systems, etc. And this really has kind of, now, and in COVID, we kind of, grew almost 5x on the livelihood side, which was the need of the hour. So I think good partnerships, equal partnerships, which are kind of, where the NGOs have to be open. There's a certain amount of skills that we are bringing in. There's a certain set of skills which I think, our partners or donor partners are bringing in. And I think if you're open, you're receptive, and both of them have kind of a feeling of equality, they're equal partners, then I think, and then the trust, that is when the trust develops. The results are really, really great. So we've really benefited from this. And I feel that, the push which is coming from funder partners, be it corporates or institutions, I think it is good. It just helps us do that much more in every single way. And it kind of drives us to do much more than, we can. And if for us, it's really worked well.
Right. Thanks, Jayant. Very interesting. So, we're basically talking about, and I think there's agreement that, partnerships, and that's something that is coming across very clearly in what Nidhi is saying, what Anshu is saying, what Jayant is saying, that, every partner is bringing something to the table, right? And to go back to Anshu's Havan analogy, we can't say that, oh, this person is small, so this does not have value. Sometimes, for example, like he said, if you don't have that matchstick, that Havan cannot happen. But the matchstick is just one small thing, right? So I think this is a great analogy that, we can take away even after today's discussion, that no matter the scale or the size, everybody, but I think that is something that I want to tell my not-for-profit friends. My sense is that when not-for-profits are asked, what is your core competency? Often all of them say, हम तो सब कर लेते हैं. हम skills भी करेंगे, हम education भी करेंगे, हम health भी करेंगे. And by doing that, you're actually doing not only a disservice to yourself, right, but also to the others organized in the sector, because then everybody gets stereotyped. It's all good to be an all-rounder, okay? And I'm going to use the cricket analogy here. Anshu, since you gave an analogy, I thought I should also take on from that. Even an all-rounder, basically is either better at batting or at fielding, cannot be equally good at all three things, right? So I think it's time for not-for-profits to really do a sort of an assessment, a third-party assessment, objective assessment. Why were we set up? And where do we want to head, right? That becomes important. It cannot be, and I always tell not-for-profits, my decade has been spent on working very closely with not-for-profits in aspirational districts, in very, districts which have very poor human development indicators. And I keep telling them one thing: at the end of the day, don't think only corporates will choose you. Let's foresee a day when you can also choose corporates, right? Because at the end of the day, I think partnerships, all of us continue to get obsessed only with the financial aspect of partnerships. But partnerships is about so much more. It's about knowledge transfers. It's about growing together. It's about understanding. Maybe a particular not-for-profit has a great understanding of a particular Santhali community who you want to work with, right? So those insights are important, because if they are not able to provide you those insights, your entire program design would have failed, right? Okay, coming to Shiv. I think Jayant has outlined very well why are partnerships important and what are the roles. Since this is something that you at UltraTech Cement, I'm sure, are doing, you are constantly forging partnerships. Do you also have some sort of an evaluation matrix or indicators by which you at UltraTech are measuring the efficacy of your existing partnerships? And I'll actually throw this open also for the other participants later on. If anyone has developed a matrix for evaluating existing partnerships, it will be very helpful for the others.
Rohan, we at the Retail Builder Group not only implement with partners, we also implement with ourselves. But directly we implement projects directly by ourselves. So there is no separate matrix as such to measure the partnerships, partners differently. Whatever we measure us, we measure the partners as well. Because we don't take them as different when we implement a project or implement projects in different levels. It is a team which is implemented. So the normal matrices that we use for us for our implementation, like the logical framework analysis or the social assessment and the deliverables that had come and the feedback and from the implementation and the return on investment. So these are the normal matrices that we use for ourselves and as also the partners, because we don't take partners as different in this case. We are all partners in development, as we believe, but these are the very common things, like the number of projects implemented by the partner and the process implemented. How seamless were they while implementing? Were they isolated? Were they doing that in isolation? The passion to implement, the integrity with which they approach the cause and their commitment.
Excellent. I think so. UltraTech has something already made, and I think it's great that maybe other companies on this platform can actually learn from. The whole purpose is for us to learn from each other. And when we open this up later for all of you other friends who have joined in, we'd also like to know if you have developed some sort of an evaluative framework whereby you are evaluating your partnerships, because then we say that then partnerships are integral to CSR and to us achieving development outcomes. Arnav, I'll come to you. You are into grant making as part of the Gates Foundation. What are the criteria that Gates Foundation actually uses to evaluate partnerships or forge partnerships? Because I think that'll be very useful for our not-for-profit friends here who will, after today, be submitting proposals to you. So what is it that you really look at? Do you give importance to values like Nidhi and Anshu said? Do you give importance to non-financial aspects? What is it that BMGF looks at?
Thanks, Rohan. So I think both of the things we look at, what you mentioned, I think one other point which was mentioned before was equity, equality, equilibrium. So to me, And to us, I think we should not look at funders as, vehicle of funding, but also, where they can add value and engagement. And I think Jayant also referred to that. And also at the same time, one should not look at, the NGOs or the implementing partners as in just implementers. So I think both, there needs to be an equilibrium in both need to be participating and co-creating. I think that kind of sets the long-term trust, which Nidhi also referred to, because I think at the end of the day, trust is the bedrock for any relationship, or any partnership. From our perspective, I think we look at, alignment on goals, focus on sustainable long-term impact and systems change. There's also, the financial due diligence, which is, of course, something one needs to do from a compliance perspective, but also is there, there's passion and hunger in both sides. I mean, from our side also, because we, hope to be impatient optimists and race for impact. And at the same time, in the partner organizations, we also, seeing that kind of, innovating, flexibility, course correcting, but at the same time being very squarely focused on, the goal and the larger numbers or results framework that we're trying to achieve, right? So we, in every partnership, when we'll upfront co-create and co-design, a results framework, and then over time measure the impact and see whether it's qualitative indicators, quantitative indicators, but together make sure that we are evolving, course correcting, because what we might have signed up for day one might not, things might change given the environment, change in environment. So can we course correct quickly and then fail quickly also at the same time? I think you mentioned about aspirational districts before, so I'll just refer to that. That's been one of the great platforms where a lot of different partners have come together, and again, which has been very much aligned on specific goals that the entire program was set out to achieve. Multiple corporates and implementing partners have all been part of that. From Pyramid Foundation to ITC to the Tatas. So if you look at that entire as one, you'll see that, Pyramid was working on health, water, TRIF was working on, with Ministry of Home Affairs in the left-wing extremist districts. Tata's Trust and ID Insights were undertaking household surveys for measurement of outcomes. And then there's also MicroSave, which was looking at, the agenda on financial inclusion. So I think all has been kind of working together in collaboration to make sure that what we're looking for. And just I'll close with one line. I think something which we very closely and strongly believe in. If you want to go fast, you can go alone. But if you want to go far, you have to go together. So it's important that we go together because we want to go far.
Thanks. That's very well summed up, Arnav. Now we'll come to the next section, which is largely to talk about the CSR ecosystem. We've spoken about partnerships, all of that, but we're talking about partnerships in a particular context, and that is about the CSR ecosystem. So I'll come to Nidhi. Firstly, Nidhi, my compliments to the HCL Foundation. I think the HCL grant that you have is so beautifully conceptualized. HCL is a company that recognizes the contribution of NGOs in nation building. You also call the NGO sector as the fifth estate, right? I've done a little bit of my research as well. So that's so heartening to know that this is how corporates see NGOs. So I'd like to know a little bit from you because BMGF has said, how do they look at partnerships and because I also want today's forum to be useful for friends who've joined us so that we can straight away start forging partnerships. So how does HCL Foundation select partners? I mean, is there any criteria? Is there a certain format? And also in the same vein, I'd like to understand from you, do you think tendering is a good process? Or maybe I'll put that to Anshu, because I did a lot of work with public sector and they have this tendering process. So Anshu, that's questions for you. But before that, Nidhi, how does this HCL grant work? And why do you think HCL gives so much of importance to NGOs?
Thanks for that question and all the research that you've done on HCL grant. I think it's been quite a journey, I would say. It's the 8th edition. We just closed the application round and, we were also analyzing internally. There were almost like 15,000 registrations that have happened this edition precisely because, there has been a funding gap in the sector because of COVID and the regular spaces of environment, health, and education are not as well addressed, I would say. Of course, there is very clear kind of, well-defined methodology, I would say. And at HCL Foundation, not only in HCL Grant, but our other flagship initiatives, say Samuday, Uday and Harit and so on, there is definitely a clear, I would say, space for partnerships. And if you talk to, I don't think we believe in this whole tendering kind of a process, because that's the different, where you have already decided the service that you want to kind of implement, and that's another. We also do, we also work independently. Like, for example, I'm heading towards Nagpur, where we're going to host our very big Sports for Change initiative, where children and young people from all over India are traveling. Teams from Northeast have arrived and so on. So there are things which we have to do directly because they're passion driven. They are ideas which have emerged from the team. We really don't have other players who can do it at that scale. And being HCL, I think that scale is one merit that we bring to the table. But when it comes to, including in HCL Grant, there's a clear weightage that we have, 40% for governance, 60% for program. And then we look at relevance is very critical for us, which geography it is coming from, what kind of topography that region has, what kind of ethnicity it has, etc. The entire demographic profile. So the very clear matrices that we use. There is this whole concept of financial modeling, whether the model itself is fit for a grant, is it fit for individual funding, is it value for rupee, etc. And we don't do apple versus orange kind of comparison that, for example, if there's a proposal from Nagaland or Manipur, and then we start comparing it with implementation costs, let's say, somewhere in the heart of Mumbai or Delhi, there's a difference. So we look at a lot of factors. We look at scalability and Sorry,
I'll come in there because I want my friends who have joined us today to do a little bit more homework, right? So I think, Nidhi, you've told us about the HCL grant. So those of you are interested, right? And that is as part of the training that we are giving. Like I said, I want today's conversation to be very actionable, right? Not just conversation.
Yeah, there is enough. I would say that there's so many symposium recordings available. If you just Google them out, there's so much you'll get. We held like almost 10, 15, not online, but actually high-level engagement symposiums, and we just closed that. So I would welcome everyone to take a look, and it's all in public domain. And I think that's where I just want to sum this up, that transparency is the key. It's important that we travel, we go, we visit the communities, we sit with them. I think this co-creation has been spoken about so many times. So that's the crux. And to make that available is where we kind of remain committed. We don't hide any information, so as to say, yeah.
So Anshu, there is a lot to learn from HCL in terms of transparency. She has just been very transparent about the HCL grant. And, I think exactly because transparency is the key and we want to kind of advocate that. BMGF on today's forum has told you what are their expectations if you are applying for a partnership. HCL Foundation has told you what are the requirements. And we'll also hear from Shiv. Coming to you, Shiv, next. And I'll come to you, Anshu, towards the end.
Before you get there, I must say there's lots to learn from Anshu and Goonj in terms of commitment. There are first ever, though it's not converted into financial, but the power of one campaign that we have, our 200,000 employees are very fond of the work that Anshu does. So I just want to say that, commitment is what we really need to learn from, veterans like him.
Oh, yes. We are all so proud of the work that Goonj does, and more power to Anshu, you and Goonj. So, yes, Shiv, coming to you. In fact, we'd like to hear from you. And, this is the part where we are ending and just taking your closing remarks from all the panelists. A is for all the friends who want to apply for a CSR grant from Ultratech. Do you want to tell us what are your focus areas? What is it that you will be looking at to forge partnerships with a lot of our friends who have joined in? And what is it that you'll be looking at?
We primarily look at water. Water is a primary area that we want to intervene. And the second is education, with focus on cultural education.
Right. So that's for,
Yeah. These are the two primary we look at. Yeah.
Okay, so I already see a live partnership that can be forged between Shiv and Jayant, because for all those who don't know, Magic Bus has a fantastic program called Childhood to Livelihood, right? Jayant, do you want to take us a little bit through that journey, as well as talk about because Magic Bus clearly is one of the foremost nonprofits who have got a lot of CSR funding, right? So my compliments to your team, whoever is getting you, and I think we need some of the other organization would love to learn from your expertise, some of the smaller organizations who want to scale up, that what is the secret of Magic Bus's fundraising, and how have you gone about with your collaboration? So can you share some of the secret tips with our other friends?
Sorry, thank you for that, Rohan. So Rohan, see, again, I think both Anshu, Nidhi, and I think, now everyone's kind of spoken about, the importance of, transparency, high governance, also, the impact, the social return on investment. And so I think this is what, any funder, whether it's a corporate or an institutional funder, they're looking at basically evidence that the money is being put to the right cause. It is actually, making an impact. And they think that, as much of the money as possible has to go into the program. But yes, I know, there has to be a strategic team. Without that, you can't affect whatever you're doing on the ground. So very clearly, if you ask me, first is, I'll tell you what we've done. So we went after it in stages, in, one by one. So any funder, corporate or otherwise, would be looking at basically transparency. They would be looking at governance. So we've got technology across Magic Bus. It was very frugal initially when our financial health was not all that great. Now that we're in good financial health, we are kind of, engaging and making it more scalable. So I would say that, we are probably one of the most automated Indian NGOs. The other thing is they're looking at basically no egg on the face. So, there's proper audit, there's KPMG or one of the big four credible people who are doing the audits. Then they're seeing that whether especially corporates are looking at whether the NGO is corporatized or institutionalized, rather not corporatized, institutionalized. So whether there are good practices, systems, processes, maker, checker, there's no egg on the face. So I think that's the other thing that they're looking at. And I think lastly, there's some of the corporates also want to amplify the work that they're doing. So, you have to have a good communications team to be able to kind of, take that message across. So if you're ticking these boxes and, you're doing some credible, good work, I think, I'm sure, most of the funders would give you a hard look. And probably, I don't know if Shiv has any opinion on this. Would be good to get this from Shiv, his perspective. But that's broadly what we've tried to, build over a period of time. And the fact that, the funding has grown, and we also do a corporate funder survey, corporate partner survey every year, where they kind of rate us on the different aspects, our openness to hearing, how collaborative we are, how responsive we are, and it's not that we just kind of accept everything from the partner, like Anshu said, it has to be. So we also kind of tell them the areas that we want to go to, where the need is really there. We don't want to go to a place just for the heck of because some partner wants us to go there. So there's a negotiation which happens. We would love to go to the aspirational districts. So we have a criteria in terms of which are the fundings that we will actually select, and we've said no to a lot of our large funders who want to get into areas that we don't focus and have expertise. So it also builds that trust that okay, these guys know what they're doing and they understand the domain and they just want to focus on that. So that's broadly.
Fantastic, Jayant. I think you've summed it up so well, and this is a great learning for other, smaller or medium-sized organizations who want to scale up and who want to, crack the CSR pitch. And I think that's why I wanted to, really bring in this and focus less on the theoretical part, which I wanted to be more practical, so that there are key takeaways from each of your learnings, because you all have demonstrated it, right? For example, Magic Bus has been able to secure a lot of CSR mandates, and I'm not surprised, given that all that you spoke about, Jayant. Fantastic. My compliments to your team, and I hope that Magic Bus becomes one of the pioneering organizations in the sector through capacity building. And I'm happy to, on behalf of Samhita, to do this along with Magic Bus, so that we can actually build capacity of the sector. Because for me, it's not about individual organizations, but it's basically about how do we create a resilient social sector. I think that's something that Anshu, BMGF, and everyone is equally passionate about. So,
can I just this is an important point. And so this capacity building, I think, is really, really important that you touched upon. And in fact, see, what we are now doing is, so we are probably one of the more institutionalized NGOs with good practices, governance, transparency, and a very strong impact. So, in fact, we are now trying to roll out a program where we are saying that any person who's worked for Magic Bus, because they've gone through, post-systematic working, if people want to leave Magic Bus after 3 to 5 years or whatever it is, we will help facilitate their induction into any other organization, social sector, because I think it is our duty to kind of, bring out, or share whatever we've learned with the rest of the sector too. So you just want to table that.
Fantastic. That's excellent. And like I said, all of us, I think should do, this conversation cannot just be a one-off. So I am definitely going to be looking at your website a little more closely. And again, you mentioned why communication is important. So to all my friends in the not-for-profit sector, it's very important that you bring in technology. And, we have HCL Foundation. We have so many other organizations who are providing tech support. You need to move into institutionalization. And this is something that has been, a challenge for the not-for-profit sector for a long, long time, that its institutionalization is weak. It's usually led by very charismatic leaders. Once they move out, the entire institution crumbles. So Anshu, I hope that being a charismatic leader, you have built institutionalization in Goonj, because you will have to devote yourself to larger interests of the country. So I hope Goonj continues the great work with or without Anshu. And of course, you also spoke about, Jayant, about this survey, corporate funder survey. I think so important to constantly track what is it that the corporate wants, what is it that the funders want, how is the sector changing, and that research becomes very important. That's why today you see a lot of not-profits are having a separate research wing, right? So it's serious business. I think what we have spoken about so far tells us that development cannot just be "mujhe aaj kuch acha karne ka hai." Right? It has to be a very serious agenda. A lot of times and skill is being devoted, and we should also account for all of that, right? So my thing to also not-for-profits would be, please do not shy away from actually, or feel guilty that, I have budgeted so much of admin overheads, because it is important. I mean, if you want to improve your development outcomes, you need to have, the right human resources, and some of them are expensive propositions. Coming to you, Arnav, and this is where we will end with Anshu. But before that, to Arnav, quickly, we know about partnerships being more in the realm of transactional service agreements, right? It's like an MOU or a work order. How can we move away from that and move into transformational partnerships, right? And at BMGF, do you recall any one particular partnership which you can say that, this actually went beyond a typical transactional service agreement, and it was truly a transformational experience for both, I don't like to use the word donor-donee, but for the sake of everyone, it was both a transformational experience for the donor as well as the donor. Is there anything that you would like to share?
Thanks, Rohan. So I think, we aim to, or at least aspire to have all of our partnerships being, not being service agreements. In fact, we like to call, the organization, everyone we work with as partners only, so we don't refer to in any of the documents also. I hope so if we do, to correct that, but I don't think so, to my knowledge, any other term, because these terms are important. I'll there are multiple examples I can go for, but there's one which is currently on and maybe might be relevant even to the current discourse is, coming out of COVID, the focus on capacity building, resilience has been some of the terms which, are being looked at, and rightly so. So last year, HCL Foundation launched the GROW Fund, the Grassroots Resilience Ownership and Wellness Fund, and which is basically aimed at, reaching out, building, supporting, sustaining 100 organizations for a period of 2 years. Think about $15 million or 100 CR has been committed by various organizations to make sure that, the 100 organizations that will be participating as part of that are able to look at 2 or 3 things. One, I think resilience for the current time frame as things come back to normal. Second, looking at also capacity building and future readiness. And I think in that entire partnership, the focus on DEI, on making sure that, everyone across the country from east, west, north, south to the islands of Andaman, Lakshadweep, that we reach out to everyone. We reach out in different languages, not just only have English as a common language of discourse, reach out in local, regional languages to make a lot of effort to go deep and wide to make sure a lot of people participate in that. And then also lend it with, the right governance at the top of it, that we are, the process selection and the process that we're setting up is also scalable tomorrow, because we might want to do another similar rounds of,
that's right,
similar rounds of funds for other ideas also, right? So, I think that's could be one to call out. And just to close out, I'll say for any partnership or anything, I think, कभी कुछ जीतने के लिए कभी कुछ हारना भी पड़ता है. So I think, one needs to seek control also at the same time. And to win, you need to make sure that, taking everyone along part of that, not just about you. And that's why only when everyone will win, you'll win. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Arnav. Beautifully summarized. And I think this is something that is coming across from all panelists is that, and this is something that I also started by saying, development in India is not a one-man show. It is a multi-starrer where, everybody's part of this, film, okay? And everybody's part of the celebration, right? And with that, we'll close this section. But before we close, Anshu, I'm told you are the Asia 21 leader of Asia Society from the batch of 2008. And I'm sure he has so many other accolades to his credit. So, we would like you to do the honors to, close this panel discussion. And, how can today's panel discussion be enough without talking of COVID? The pandemic has, really changed our world, and it has led us to a better normal, like we at Samhita like to call it. And my question, therefore, is on that, Anshu, for you, is that how or what are some of the strategies for the sector as a whole to scale up during a crisis? And, and since you have been an active part of this pandemic crisis, how do you think, what would be your learnings or sharings to the other friends on those wanting to scale up?
So, Rohan, I think we need a deeper and a much bigger conversation sometime. But the most important part, before I talk about the scale up in a minute, I think the most important part, I always feel that the development sector has, especially I'm talking about the NGOs and the social development sector, has never asserted its space and knowledge and so many other things, right? And that's why I say that, in the partnerships and all, the mutual respect for each other is extremely, extremely important. I think it is extremely important for a large number of even the corporate sector to go to Jayant, to Magic Bus or to John Bhai, to, Room to Read, and so many other organizations which I can see here, that how did they build partnerships? How come that magic happened? Because we are talking about partnership of an organization with money plus the implementation organization. But the fact remains that implementation organizations also have built up huge partnerships. That's how we all have grown. So what is that secret sauce of that? What is that mutual respect? So there has to be a huge amount of learning from each other in the sector, because development sector is evolved. Large number of institutions now do say no to the wrong partners. It's not that we all accept everything which is coming in our way. These are wrong notions about the sector. I mean, I have good friends in McKinsey to KPMG to everywhere, but the fact remains that community audit, social audit were not taught by KPMG. That actually came from the grassroots, And at the time of Baba Amte and Ilaben, we are talking about professionalism now, fine, because we want to talk about professionalism. But do understand that these people were ultra professional, hugely professional. That's how they built up those institutions without having any resources with them. So it's very important for now that we are working together, fine, and it is mandated to work together. Before CSR, it was not a mandate. It was our whole wish whether we want to work together or not. This is a relationship of equal, and this is how we'll be able to scale up. But only when we learn from each other, and only when we understand that this social development sector exists for last hundreds of years. Every single act which is useful for us, from right to information to right to food to whatever, is actually come because of the social development sector. So this sector certainly deserves more respect, and a lot of people who are entering in this sector now through CSR or many other platform, they need to learn more from the sector, that how this sector survived, has grown, has done such tremendous work. But unfortunately, we are not speaking that language. Everyone comes and tells us that what do we learn? अरे मने कौन कर रहा है यार, हम सीख तो रहे हैं लगातार, but 20 साल से घास थोड़ी काट रहे हैं, थोड़ा हमसे भी सीख लो. Fine, that is what we all need to come, and then only we will be able to scale up things. Disaster ke time mein when you spoke, and I'll just, in a minute, because the time is getting over. the implementation organization or the organization on the ground will tell you ki dal chahiye ki chawal. People with money have no right to tell us that. Please understand, because you are on the ground. यदि ग्राउंड की सुनी होती तो हम वेंटिलेटर नहीं बांटते. उस समय भी दाल चावल ऑक्सीजन थी इस देश की 90% 99% लोगों के लिए. The actual oxygen was dal chawal for large number of people. ऐसा नहीं था कि second wave में खाने की प्रॉब्लम खत्म हो गई थी. But even not only the leprosy का money is gone in COVID, but even the food का money is also gone in oxygen. If we listen to the grassroots, then we can work and then we can scale up in a very, very big way. तो scaling up का जो पहला मंत्र है वो मेरे हिसाब से listening है. हम वहां पे मात खा रहे हैं और इसलिए नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. कई बार क्यों एक ही साल में पैसा खर्च करना है भाई? आप जनवरी में पैसा दोगे और कहोगे मार्च में खत्म करो, कैसे होगा? नहीं होगा. These are long term issues and the fact remains, Rohan, just to finish it, that a large number of CSR people, corporate people, and I mean I have also personal friends and organizational friends, they're also evolving. It was too overwhelming for them also because वो अभी तक दूर से देख रहे थे या वो एक वॉलंटियर की तरह का भी काम करते थे. वो उनके हाथ में इतना पावर होगा या इतना मैंडेट होगा या उनको इतना करना पड़ेगा. They also never thought. They were also not prepared. I have seen Nidhi growing in this path. I've seen so many other people. I have Suresh here. A lot of people they are also evolving. But वो I think हम सब लोगों की all this is absolute bullshit कि corporate है या NGO है. मतलब we all are human being and we're trying to work for the human being as partners, fine. But I think that basic humility is extremely important. And that learning and listening to the ground is extremely, extremely important. That mutual respect is extremely important. That scale is just one part of it.
Which we will discuss in length for the next roundtable. So this is an idea for Bloomberg and Asia Society India. The next roundtable that we do will just be on scaling up, and I am hoping that most of you will be back there. But thank you very much, Anshu, for that. And you mentioned Baba Amte. Baba Amte has been somebody I've been very close to the Amtes, and he said one very simple thing, and I entirely agree with you that And I started off by saying professionalization. Who holds the standards, right? But at the end of the day, see, it's not an either or. I think development sector is all about ands, right? It's not an either or. It's not a black and white. Development sector is about celebrating all the colors of the rainbow. That's what I believe in. And that's why I started by talking about LGBTQIA+, because it's important to recognize everybody. Okay, otherwise, even in our survey forms, I see, are you a male or female? I mean, so we therefore are perpetuating, what we're talking. So I think, and therefore evolution. What you said, Anshu, is that everybody is evolving, the sector is evolving, and it's important that all of us on today's discussion also are open to evolution. Because if we don't evolve, if we continue to work in silos, it's going to affect the sector, and it's going to affect, again, going back to what I started with, the whole SDGs. And yes, to talk about Baba Amte, something that I always, remember, one thing he said: don't work for the people, work with the people. And I think this is a very, very important paradigm shift in the way we do development. I know that today a lot of us corporates are working for people, and therefore there's no harm in that. But there is a difference. And going forward, as you evolve, I hope that you start working more with people and move away from working for people. You also spoke about, Anshu, listening to people. And, in 2010, I actually did a study. I led a study called Listening to People in Poverty, right? And it's so important. We often always think as researchers, as experts, we know everything, right? And I remember I went to a small, slum in M Ward in Mumbai. And when I was leaving, with all my tabs and data instruments and my research team, one old lady was sulking in one corner. I went and asked her, "Tai, kya hua? Why are you not happy? We are giving you so much of funding. यहाँ पे विकास होने वाला है." She's told me one thing. आप लोग ने बहुत बोला है, आपने हमारा सुना है, हमें इस चीज की जरूरत है. And I think this is where all the needs assessment, all that we talk about, right? And that calls for a separate discussion. But please let us turn the tables and start listening to people. Let's not treat people just as data-giving agents. And I keep telling my research team that, right? people are not just here to give us data, but it's important for us. And that's where the value framework that Anshu and Nidhi spoke about, empathy, mutual respect, all that becomes important. And that's why today, development is an important and serious agenda. It's not that, we just want to do some good, so let's do it. So with that, thank you, everybody, all the panelists, for, great takeaways and great perspectives. And thank you also for sharing some of the things that you would look at when our other participants apply to you for grants and other fundraising activities. And this is the time which I am most excited about. And this is the time which is an open forum for all of you who have so far been patiently hearing us. Okay. So the next 10 to 15 minutes is entirely devoted to all of you. Only thing is, if you have any questions, any comments, any suggestions, anything you agree with, anything you disagree with, please put up your hand and we would love to hear from you. It's because this is a very participatory platform. So you have heard the panelists speak, and I deliberately am not calling them experts because there are a lot of experts also among all of you participants. So my only request is please put on your video, and if you could just put up your hand so that our team can see you, it would be lovely. And we will, for next 10, 15 minutes is entirely yours. So the floor is open. Can I see some e-hands, please? And if you want to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, yes, please.
Nayak had a question.
Please go ahead, Mr. Nayak. Please keep it brief. My only request is please keep your questions very brief or suggestions, because we want to take as many questions as possible over the next 10, 15 minutes. Yes, yeah. Mr. Nayak.
Yeah. I have worked in both the sides, in corporate and NGO. I've got 2 points. Rest are covered. First is, what do we mean by NGOization of corporate? Do we mean achieving efficiency with minimum resources, or what? Second one is NGO social responsibility. I think people associated with NGOs, community leaders, founders, top management, is there ISR, I think, individual social responsibility. So we don't need to use this term. This is my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nayak. Very, very important questions. Any more questions, and then we will have our panelists respond to them. I'm sorry, I can't see all of you, but Purvaja, I'll request you to help me in case you see any hands up. It may not be questions, it may be agreements, it may be disagreements, it may be sharing of your company's CSR, your experiences of partnerships, what has worked, what has not worked, anything. The floor is all yours. And I also see a lot of people from all over the world have joined us. I see Ruth Shapiro here. Ruth, you do some excellent work with the Doing Good Index. Thank you very much for joining us on this forum. Is there anything you would like to share?
Okay. Can I ask my question?
Yes, please, Ruth, but your audio is not very clear.
Okay.
Hi, Ruth. Go ahead. Thank you.
Is it better now?
It is, Ruth. Yes.
Okay. We did a study on public-private partnerships for social good across Asia, including a number of collaborative arrangements, public-private partnerships in India. And surprisingly, 60% of the PPPs for social good that we looked at created special built-for-purpose NGOs to be the secretariat and the implementer of the public-private partnership, rather than going with existing nonprofit organizations to be the implementer and secretariat of the partnership. And we asked why. Why did you feel the need to create a new organization rather than going to ones that are out there in the field already? And the response was, they're too rigid in their thinking. They're stuck to the way that they do things, and they're not flexible enough. I think one of the secret sauces for Magic Bus is its flexibility. It moved from after-school sporting programs to livelihood programs. And I think that sometimes organizations, and many do this, need to be able to pivot. One of the upsides, I suppose, or silver linings from the pandemic is that many organizations did pivot. So that's a lesson that we can learn and take with us. We need to be responsive. We need to move along and innovate and change. And I think organizations need to be able to tell these companies, we can work with you to co-create, as Arnav mentioned, and we're not stuck in exactly this model or this strategy.
Right. Thanks a lot, Ruth. And CAPS does some fantastic research. So all of you who are interested to know more about the trends in philanthropy, etc., please look up some of the reports. Thanks for sharing those evidences, Ruth. Very useful.
Well, not only that, we're doing a program with the Asia Society that's open to all of you on July 27th. And I think they're going to put some information up there on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you for inviting me to speak.
Pleasure. Next question, I'd like to bring in Mr. Shankar Jadhav from the Bombay Stock Exchange. Are you here, Mr. Jadhav? It's important that you tell all our friends here about how do you think the proposed social stock exchange, discussing about, how will that impact the whole corporate NGO partnerships? Do you see that as a boon or a bane?
Actually, thank you very much. I'll just put my video on. Yes, I think I can see everyone. It was a very interesting discussion, and I understand that CSR has disrupted the whole thinking of lots of NGOs as well as people who wanted to contribute to the sector. But we really have a lot to learn. And we had done this social stock exchange experiment. We had an exchange called Samman, CSR Samman. If many of you know, we tried to get the corporates and the projects together, but both the corporates as well as the projects, the NGOs, could not match so well, is what our experience is. Maybe it was an earlier experience. But what happened over a time is now the corporates as well as NGOs are much better off. In fact, that's the reason why SEBI now has decided to implement the social stock exchange themselves, and we are helping them in a big manner. Right. What I would like to say is, it's not only money or time. The government also has to learn, and the people who require help also have to learn. It is a thought process by many that if you are a rich person, you should not be really taking on any causes. And if you are a poor person, the person does not know how to take the cause ahead. So there are lots of cases where you find that the NGOs are targeted, etc. The second point I wanted to mention is that the funding. Earlier, there were no audit trails, there was no IT-related services available. But today, wherever you get funds from, like we have an annual information report for individuals and other corporates also, based on the PAN number. For the NGO sector also, we will have this report, and the restrictions put on funding, either through foreign as well as India, will reduce. So I see a lot of funding coming up. During COVID, I have seen what everyone has mentioned is correct, that most of the people were giving things which were not required or which were not technologically feasible, because that's what the donors wanted to give. The fourth point I wanted to make is,
last, please, if you can make it brief, Mr. Jadhav.
Very brief. Someone pointed out that one requires to highlight what work they've done. One of the reasons why that is important is in social sector especially is people see others doing things and then they feel like doing it, or they would like to contribute or learn from it. So that's one thing I would always tell corporates as well as NGOs, do highlight what you are doing to all others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jadhav. It's interesting that you gave these insights. I'm sure it will help and value add a lot of nonprofits who are looking at being prepared to be onboarded on the social stock exchange. There is a detailed report by Samhita on the social stock exchange. For those interested, you can get in touch with either Mr. Jadhav or else go through the report. Next question for Ms. Kalpana Sriraman, please.
Hi, I hope I can all hear me.
Yes, we can.
So I am a scientist and I work at the Foundation for Medical Research. It's a scientific research organization. We work in biomedical and public health research in the area of infectious disease. So it's a completely different kind of setup than, we are not an implementing agency. We are not people who work at the grassroots, but we try solve problems for what is there at the grassroots. So my question, or it's not really a question, my urge to CSR and foundation is, over the years, your social sector has moved towards bringing impact, scalability. I understand that. But I think, like, as we do in our personal lives, when we invest our personal finances to diversify, why can't these organizations look at, say, 10% or 5% or 1% of their foundation money to experiment invest in new things? That's my question.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kalpana. Last question to Mr. Sujit Sahu.
Yes. Good morning. I am from CAF India, Charities Aid Foundation, India. And so thank you for the discussion. I have few comments that I just like to share. Happy and agree with the term partnership. I think this is more to do with partnership, and it's an urge to the corporates. And I feel it very awkward when they send a form to say that, ये vendor registration form भर दीजिए. So it feels different. We are not vendors. We are NGOs. We are experts, as Anshu said, and we are partners. So let's look at us, or look at the development sector as partners, co-contributors in the development. That's number one. The number two is, how do we move away from the term donor and implementer kind of thing? We need to look at partnership as a model in development. The third thing is, there are different kinds of implementers or NGOs. There are grassroots level NGOs. There are NGOs who have expertise, grown over a period of time, learned many, as Nidhi said, professionalism and thing. We look at from a consortium model where an NGO leads who have experience, and then helps the grassroots level NGOs who are in the field, who are at the bottom, and help them to grow. And one day they will also apply for CSR funding kind of thing. So look at a model where there are different kinds of NGOs and work with them, not only just one kind of NGO. The fourth point quickly is how to bridge the development gap. There are government doing programs, there are corporate doing programs, NGOs doing programs, but then the partnership, if we can look at bridging the gap between and contributing to the gap created. Government is running some programs. How can the partnership contribute to the gap that is created, and not do something parallelly? Let's not invest our money for parallel programs, but at least try to contribute to address the gap, or prepare a field so that the development programs can happen well. So that's something we can take, we can learn, and we can contribute. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Sujit. I think all very, very important pointers, and I think some of the responses would definitely entail another roundtable, which I'm sure Inakshi and her team and Bloomberg are considering. And I think there have been so many points that have come. But quickly, to kind of close the loop, I think Mr. Nayak had questions about what is this NGOization of corporates. He feels that NGO social responsibility will not work because there's already something called ISR. And of course, I think, Sujit, you mentioned something which I agree with as well, that, NGOs are not vendors. If you're talking about partners, and going back to what Anshu started with saying, that, basically we have to talk about a change in semantics and language. Unless we do that, it will still remain the same old, old wine in a new bottle kind of thing. So quick half a minute responses from our panelists who are still with us. Jayant is here, Arnav is here, and I see Anshu is here, and Shiv. So the questions that have come, quick half a minute responses, please, and then we will close. Thank you all for all your questions. Some of the questions that you have not been able to ask or put down, I am sharing my email ID. Please feel free to write into me, and we will be happy to kind of take this conversation forward. Yeah. So quick half a minute responses from the panelists, please.
Okay, I'll go first. In fact, I think I heard one question which was about basically, investing some money in research. I think very relevant question. So I just would kind of want to share that, yes, we do kind of, look at, new projects. We call them innovation projects. We do that in a controlled environment. We try and solve these generational old problems, either using technology or bringing some new concepts. And once we feel that it's working, we try and scale that and take it to the rest of the programs. And we work very collaboratively with a lot of partners, like, many of our partners, unfair to kind of, pick names, but I can talk about one such area where, Azim Premji is funding us to build the whole retail funding piece. So they worked for 1.5 years with us to build a strategy around, retail funding, and now we're rolling it out with their help. So I think a lot of such initiatives, innovations which are there, we've also rolled out a award called the Innovation and Risk Award, where we are encouraging people to fail, but not fail at the same thing, but also kind of so that the learnings are there from the failures, whatever learnings are there, we take them within the organization. So broadly, the answer is yes, I think it's a great thing. I'm sure a lot of other NGOs are doing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Shiv, half a minute, please, for you to summarize. You can choose to respond to the questions that the other participants raised.
I will to share something. I will share a thing which Rohan will like. We have partners with us who work for us, and there are some partners who do impact assessments for us. So these partners, they have a precondition for us that once the impact assessment findings are there, we need to act on that. So we have a written commitment to that effect that we will actually act on that. So that's the power. That's the power of partnership. I mean, that's the self-esteem that they have, or that's the empowerment that a partner has. So so actually are equal partners. That's what I wanted to share.
Right. Thanks, Arnav.
Thanks. I'll take that question on the infectious disease, given that research is critical on for us, and we're working on many infectious diseases from lymphatic filariasis, tuberculosis, malaria, and so forth. And linked to R&D and the other, even in COVID, and currently also a lot of surveillance work, whether it's wastewater surveillance, environmental surveillance, sewage surveillance is also being undertaken. Diagnostics is also critical. In fact, there is a grand challenges for lymphatic filariasis, which is currently on, in which we are looking at innovative ideas to help foster more innovation for diagnostics in LF. And then also, there are research collectives like the India Health Systems Research Collective, which was set up in 3 years back to focus on design on health systems overall. And then finally, there are also now Indian foundations such as Foundation for Advancing Science and Technology, which Ashish Dhawan has set up. I think so. There is more happening in that space, and I agree, that more needs to be done on the entire R&D space, given it's it's not an area where governments would take the risk, or even corporates sometimes will be able to take the risk. So we believe that as an international foundation or as a private philanthropy, we can take some of those risks and fund some of those innovative ideas. Thanks.
Right, thanks. And the last, I think, Anshu, you're still there.
So Rohan, nothing much to add. I think I've already, whatever I thought I have spoken. But I think simple thing is that we should not be too worried about measuring everything. I think that's like you talk about the measurement of dignity. Dignity cannot be measured, fine, because you cannot even give dignity to people. Dignity is like given. We are born with dignity. We can only snatch dignity or value dignity. So I don't know how will you really measure that. And the last point, which will be an answer to many things and many questions, is an understanding of all of us that somewhere we all need to sit or analyze and see that in the last 2 years of pandemic, what worked and what didn't work, and what worked why, what didn't work why. I mean, because the common statement which people are saying is post-COVID, and I've been arguing that there's nothing like post-COVID. It is all with COVID, right? I mean, the implication and the impact of COVID, what happened on us. So it's extremely important to find answers for many, many things, is to humbly accept some of our failures, celebrate some of our success, and understand that this is not the same world where we started our journey. Within the last 2 years, it is a completely different world, and it will be a different world till the time at least I am alive in my lifetime.
Right. Thanks, Anshu. I think with that, very, very good summary, I think, by our panelists. And with that, I would like to actually bring a close to this. We tried to have a very iterative kind of a design where, we were taking in questions. Some of your questions were already answered, some are unanswered. Those that are not answered, or if there is any, I'm sure that all of us gave you a lot of food for thought, right? So please feel free to write in to Asia Society India Center or Bloomberg or us. We would be happy to kind of take this conversation forward. I want to thank all the panelists, for really giving us their time and for sharing with us their wisdom, right? I think all of them, and special thanks also to Nidhi, because, she was traveling, but she made it a point to attend this. So, all of you are very busy people. Despite that, you have really made time for this, and that shows the respect that you have for the sector. So, Anshu, this is putting your values in practice, and values are very important in developer practice. So thank you very much to all the panelists for the time and insights. I want to thank all the other participants who, like I said, are equals as all of us, because you are also our thought leaders in whatever work you do. You are the candle or the matchstick in the oven, remember? So all of us have today together collaboratively made this development oven possible. So thank you to all the participants for your questions and interventions. I want to especially thank Vandana and Aggie from Bloomberg for really, supporting this roundtable series. As you know, this will continue. And I think a lot of discussions, points, insights that were shared today, I can definitely see that it moves into a separate roundtable discussion. So we will be happy to, be a part of this, and I'm sure all of you will support us. So thanks, Vandana and Aggie from Bloomberg. And last but not the least is Inakshi from the Asia Society India Center for, really leading this, and for her commitment, and of course the entire team at Asia Society India Center. But one person that I really want to mention for all the hard work that has happened behind the wings is Purvaja. Purvaja, I mean, maybe you can put on your video, and so that people can see you. Purvaja has single-handedly, been anchoring and coordinating with all our speakers. So while the success of this entire event goes to all of us, she is the first among equals. So thank you very much, Purvaja from the Asia Society India Center, for making this conversation possible. And I'm sure and hope that we will continue with this conversation. And to end, I would like to say, taking from what Anshu said, keep evolving, keep safe. COVID is here and is here to stay. It's not the end of the pandemic, although we must know how to embrace this better normal, and keep being curious, very important, and keep reading, because if you want to be a development professional, you need to know how the sector is evolving. And I'll end with what I started by saying. Remember, development is not the job of one hero. It is something that is a multi-starrer blockbuster that all of us have a role, and it is incumbent upon all of us, be it in whatever capacity, whether we are in academia, whether we're a think tank, whether we are multilateral or bilateral, all of us are in it together, and it is our collective responsibility to build this nation and to basically empower the sector as a whole. Thank you very much. And apologies that we went slightly overboard with the time, but that is bound to happen when the discussions are so rich and nuanced. Thank you very much. My name is Rohan Sarma, and I will be happy to keep this conversation going on along with all of you. Thank you very much.